Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cast and Spear podcast. My name is John, and today we have back on the show Lindsey Philpott, one of the experts in knots, and you can find his books at theknotguy.com. Welcome to the show, Lindsey.
Thank you very much, John. Good to be here.
Today we are going to do kind of a part two of yesterday's interview on knotting structures. So, Lindsey, yesterday we talked about understanding wraps, understanding bights, understanding all these different high-level things. What else can we cover to really hammer in home everything that is to know about knots?
Well, I think it's vital, John, when we're looking at knots of any form, that we understand how to make the knot. So teach yourself how to remember what motions need to be made in order to make the knot. When you've done that, then you'll have some better idea about whether or not multifilament works well with monofilament, whether monofilament can only work with monofilament, whether multifilament needs to be tucked inside itself, or if monofilament can be tucked into multifilament and still work. So let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about the idea that we have two different types of line, mono and multi filament, being put together. What's the best thing to do with a piece of monofilament? Well, if I have monofilament, what I really want to do is to form that structure that I talked about, having the bight in the monofilament. That way, I'm going to spread the load between the two legs of the bight and take the greatest advantage. If I only go on one leg of the monofilament, things will slip off the end. And that's something very good to understand is, okay, so I've got two legs. What if I put in three legs? Will that be better? Well, sometimes three legs is a good thing because now you're creating a back bite and a forward bite. And that can help by putting the monofilament into a situation where you can wrap it on itself and be able to derive a very structured knot. Now, I'm trying to show this with a loop of line there. I'll get another loop of line a little bit later on and show that in better detail. But basically, when we're looking at joining lines together, we want to understand mono needs to have a bight. Does it need to have a loop? Yes, sometimes it does need to have a loop because then we can wrap a piece of multifilament back around the back of the loop and through the bight part of the loop as well, so as to be able to crush one down on top of another. If we're looking at the way in which multifilament joins to itself, well, you've got a lot of pieces of fiber that are all meshing with each other and are placed on top of each other. And you would think that with that, you would have a great deal of friction. Well, in fact, you get a whole lot better friction if you can interlace the pieces of multifilament. And I can hear one or two of you now saying to yourself, there's no way I'm going to sit there and fiddle with a piece of multifilament and weave it back into itself. You don't have to. You can use what has been termed a brummagem splice, where you actually tuck the multifilament back through its entire structure and then reverse it again and tuck it back through its own structure. This creates two inextricable loops that then tie to each other and do not allow the multifilament to ever come apart, unless, of course, some of the strands break. So think about that next time you want to join two pieces of multifilament or a piece of monofilament to monofilament or monofilament to multifilament. I hope this is not getting too detailed, but what I really want to focus on is how is this working best?
No, I don't think it's getting too detailed. I think it's actually clarifying a lot of the reasons why people choose certain line to line knots, for example, right? So it's like you could have the surgeon's knot, which is the most in my eyes, it's one of the more basic ones, right? You put the two different lines together and you do a couple overhand knots. And I think based on what you were telling me offline was that's probably like the worst way to go in terms of a structure standpoint, especially with monofilament. So I guess could you do kind of like a primer on, because I guess some of the more popular ones would be uh, uni to uni, FG knot, maybe like an Alberto knot. All of them they have elements now that I can see them now when I think about it when I make
Yes.
them. But I guess can you kind of say, the uni to uni that everybody swears by, you're using the same knot for two different material types. Sure, you might have a couple more wraps on the braid side. It's not actually the most ideal based on what we know now, or something like that. Can you kind of go over a little high level?
Basically, what we're finding is that anytime you're joining one piece of line to another, if you give a child a piece of string and you say tie a knot in it, they will automatically cross one piece over another. Will they tuck it back underneath itself and pull the two ends and then say, there, I've made a knot? Because what they're making at that point is an overhand knot. An overhand knot is a half of a turn followed by another half of a turn, neither of which is actually benefiting the other. Uh, if you tie a knot in a piece of line, you may have experienced this with your shoelaces at some point, is that you tie a knot in it and you mistakenly tie an overhand knot in it, or an overhand knot develops simply because of one line going through a loop or something. That overhand knot is the worst in terms of structure for any kind of effort to be able to provide the strength in that line. And what I mean by that is that you've crushed the line in two places. If you look at a simple crossing like this, and then you intertwine it underneath, look at what I'm having to do to my fingers in order to be able to create that. And that is that I'm having to bend them both in opposing directions. And as soon as I pull, the two loops want to come together. Well, how much better would it be if you were simply to have two loops and join them with one loop passing through the other? That would be a much, much better way of dealing with it. Does that mean that the uni to uni is not a good knot? No, uni to uni is working perfectly well, but there are better choices that you can make by understanding the wraps that you can make versus the bights that you can tuck within that to be able to generate something which is going to last well and is not going to require cutting out of the line in order to be able to replace it. Something that I didn't talk about earlier on is something that you reminded me about, John, when you were talking about having line-to-line junctions. Line-to-line junctions are great, and we touched on this briefly a short time ago. If we have a line to an object instead, and that object could be a ring, it could be a wire, it could be a hook, it doesn't really matter what the object is. What we need to do with the line is to spread the load on that object. So taking multiple turns on the object allows us to spread the load. This is something that we understand when we find that a hook has been lost, for instance. We say, well, why was that lost? Well, I only had one turn on it. Well, in that case, maybe I'll try two turns next time. You try two turns and it works. And great, that's good for perhaps the next 15 or 20 years. And then all of a sudden, the next time you do it, it breaks. And you think, well, rats, or something to that effect. And you say, all right, well then 3 turns is what I really need to spread the load. This is how we as humans learn. We make mistakes and we correct the mistakes and we go on from there. Does that mean that we can overdo it? Absolutely it does. But it also means that a lot of the time we've underdone it and we've gotten away with it. And getting away with it doesn't mean that it's good. It just means we got away with it. If we make multiple turns and those turns are useless in terms of strength, does it really matter? What have we used? Maybe half an inch or 10 millimeters of line extra? Well, it's inexpensive enough that we wouldn't really have to worry about that.
So from your
Does that help?
experience, yeah, so from your experience, do you think all monofilament to a hook should be minimum 2 turns?
Absolutely, I do.
Okay. All right. No, that's
From
great to
my
know.
experience, 4 turns is not too many. Six
Really?
turns is too many,
Okay. Well, that just blew
depending
my
on the
mind.
size difference between the hook material and the line material. If the line is 1 millimeter and the hook size is, let's say, 3 millimeters, 4 turns is good.
Perfect. And then if you had to say, I need to have a line to line knot that's not spliced, because we'll touch on splicing in another episode. What is between a mono? Well, I mean, okay, so a lot of guys here use Spectra to fluoro. So if you had to kind of just say, like, look, you can use the knot that you've been using forever, go for it. But from your experience, you recommend X knot. Which would that be for that, for fluoro to Spectra?
I think that with anytime you've got fluoro to spectra, you want to increase the number of turns of the fluoro on the spectra.
Okay.
That way, then you're spreading the load and the spectra is not going to start cutting your line.
And the same is true for mono to Spectra?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about which knots can be difficult. And if you want to meet Lindsey or reach out to him, his website is thenotguy.com, and you can find his books there as well. Thanks for being on the show, Lindsey. Hey, one more thing before you go. Are you looking for other folks who like to catch fish? Well, if you are, join our free fish catchers group on Discord. Just like a little club, just with like-minded people who like to catch fish, share knowledge. Just head over to castandspear.com/club for a link, and it'll go straight over there. Whether you like to spearfish, surf fish, kayak fish, you name it. If you just like to catch fish, we want to chat. All right, see you guys in there.